Big money, big prizes. I love it.
And welcome to another exceptional episode of Retrovaniacs, the only podcast that this week chose to talk about Bayou Billy that I'm going to listen to. As always, I'm Jeremy Parmentier, here with Jeremy Gregory.
Oh, I hate you so much.
Thank you. And Billy Holiday.
You screwed us, JP. You screwed us.
I mean, I think, to be fair, every week, whichever the two of us are that didn't pick the game, say the same thing. But I think this week, we kind of all knew ahead of time that I was setting us up for 2 weeks of misery to prepare for this episode. But I think that means it'll be a quality episode. But other than forcing ourselves to play The Adventures of Bayou Billy, what have you been playing since the last time, Billy?
Well, I think I had mentioned the last time I had picked up that Sleeping Dogs, which I kind of I played a little bit and enjoyed it about a year or two ago. I really got deep into it this time. I played it all the way through. I'm going back to, try to finish up a lot of the side quests on there. I played the DLC that came out for it, which both pieces were actually pretty good also. I did that, and I got way into Mario Maker again. I had set it down for the better part of a few weeks, and I got it back because I have a level that I posted up there. Every now and then I like to check and see if there are any notifications about it. And I saw that there were all these challenge courses that had been added, and the allure of winning alternate costumes. There are we may have explained this in the Mario Maker episode, but there are costumes, and you get them just like any other power-up by just hitting one of the coin blocks, and they turn you into different things, whether it's Waluigi, Cat Peach, Mario in a car. There are all kinds of things, and not just in the Mario world. And when I saw that you could win these things, I dedicated the better part of an hour or two trying to get through there, picking all those up, and now I'm just kind of going back around and seeing that they've done a much better job lately as far as finding better courses and not just the don't move to win variety.
Yeah, those challenge courses are really great because they're brand new characters. The other courses when you play the 100 Mario challenge or use your amiibos, but most people won't have 100 amiibos. So you do the challenge courses and you win random amiibos or random skins for your Mario, but you can only earn certain ones by playing the intermediate and certain ones by playing the hard. I still haven't cleared one of the hard rounds, the 100 Mario hard rounds.
Yeah.
But for these challenge levels, it's just one level that's actually designed by Nintendo or someone that they give a permission to build a specific level for whatever the promotion is. And then you get a specific Mario. You can only earn that way. You can't earn it any other way. And generally, especially after spending so many nights plowing through 100 of Marios to beat 5 hard levels, all these levels are not that bad. They're not easy, but they're not that hard. You should be able to get through them in a couple tries, maybe a handful of tries. But I'm glad they're there. I mean, I check once a week to see if they add new challenge levels because it's just something else. I'm glad they're supporting it.
Now, have you guys been buying the amiibos to get your characters in the game, or is this just something that you've kind of accepted that you don't want to buy amiibos for? I haven't played it yet myself, so I was always kind of interested in the fact that you could buy an amiibo and it would go into the game.
I don't think it's a reason to buy amiibos. I mean, if you already have amiibos, it's a bonus. I mean, really, the only game that kind of uses amiibos for anything other than skins or Mario Kart Mii outfits is Smash Brothers, and that even is not that important. So there's nothing yet, although I haven't played the Animal Crossing game, but there's nothing yet that uses amiibos that really needs an amiibo for. It's just if you want to collect a Mario statue, at least you have something to do with it.
Yeah, and I'm not sure the ones you unlock on there with the amiibos. Can you unlock those just randomly playing through anyhow, or are they exclusive? Do you have to have the amiibo to pick those up?
No, all of them are unlockable in the game by beating intermediate or hard levels. So there's nothing that I'm aware of, at least. There's none that require an amiibo. I think the only thing that requires an amiibo is if you have the Mario Classic 30th Anniversary Mario, which I do. That gives you the mushroom that makes Mario super big. And it's only usable when you play the original Mario skin. And I mean, it's not that useful, but it's kind of a nice bonus. I don't know if I know it's in the game. There are levels that Nintendo makes where you get that, but I don't know if you can do it yourself without that amiibo.
Now, if you actually unlock those new characters, you can only use those in like the 8-bit Mario stages, right? You can't use those in the newer ones.
Right, only 8-bit Mario. And you can either do a randomizer, which will give the player any skin they've unlocked. It'll just automatically make them, anything they've gotten at random. Or you can pick a specific one that you want people to turn into, which is the first thing I did once I earned Orlamar from Pikmin, and I made a bunch of Pikmin-themed levels for no good reason except that I love Pikmin. So it's a nice bonus, but it definitely, they've added enough things to it that definitely keeps me playing. But when I wasn't playing, the wonderful Bayou Billy this week, I jumped back on my Vita and I started playing. I only own 4 actual boxed games for it, and one of them I had never played until this week, other than just to make sure it worked, which was Sly Cooper: Thieves in Time. I really like that series. It's very simple. It's not a hard 3D action platformer compared to most others. I'd say it's easier than Ratchet and Clank, and it's easier than Jak and Daxter or any of the other Sony 3D platformers. But just how it looks like that cell-shaded color, cell-shaded look, and the fact that it's a collectathon. I don't know. It's just kind of a nice casual thing to waste some time on. So I started playing that again. I've always been a fan of that series, and I think it's a pretty solid version of that game.
I always wanted to play that. I really haven't, but I was always I kind of stay away from games that require stealth, and I know that's kind of like a very it's not a serious stealth game at all. But are the stealth sections, are they just fairly easy to walk through?
It's not hard. I mean, so far I'm not all the way through it yet. I'm probably 25-30% through it. But the stealth sections, I mean, it's not like Metal Gear where if you're found immediately the level ends or you get swamped with a million enemies. A lot of the stealth areas, it either makes you, the guy sees you and it restarts that section for you really quickly. And there's a lot of checkpoints, so you don't lose a lot of time when you do that. Or if it's just trying to not be seen, once you're seen, you run far enough away and they kind of forget that they're looking for you or they can't see you and they go back on their normal patrol path. So the stealth in it is not involved. It's not a stealth game. I mean, it's an action game where there is some stealth to it.
Okay. All right. So what's there is fairly forgiving anyway.
Yeah, like I said, it's not hard at all. I mean, there's nothing so far that I've had any real challenge with, but I didn't expect I would for that kind of game. But it's just a nice casual 3D action platform, and because of the ideas you're going through different time periods, I'm not getting bored with the scenery either. I've already gone through Japan, and now I'm in the Wild West, and I'm sure there will be plenty of other places to hop into. So what have you been playing, Jeremy?
Well, it's like the beginning of the new year, and nothing's really coming out. I kind of beat all the games that I was really wanting to play last year, kind of culminating with Fallout 4. So I was kind of dipping into my backlog to see what I've got that I haven't played that I've been really wanting to play, and I totally forgot that I bought South Park: The Stick of Truth for the Xbox 360, and that is now backwards compatible on the Xbox One. So I never got to play that. I always heard really good things about it, and last Sunday I kind of sat down with it, and my only other experience with a South Park game is the one that is often mentioned on here, which is South Park 64, which is an absolute travesty of a game. But this one, for an RPG, which is what it is, it's actually really well done. It's made by Obsidian, and those guys know how to make an RPG, and it really shows with this one. I mean, nothing is super in depth or anything. It's kind of very much of my first RPG, but it's got some nice depth to it, along with all of the South Park humor, and it goes a long way that it looks just exactly like an episode of South Park. The entire time you're playing it, it looks like you're playing an episode of South Park, and it's really funny, which was one of my favorite things about it. It's very hard to find a funny game anymore, and this one is actually pretty hilarious. So that's what I've been spending most of my time with. Did either of you play that?
I have a copy. I bought it. Target had them down to clearance. The Target by my house for something like $8. So I grabbed a copy. But because it's South Park and because I have 2 small children around my house, I have to find a time to play it when they're not awake or around. Because while I'm not necessarily concerned about the adult level of the show, I still don't need them to repeat things to my wife. So I have not played it yet. But I will get a chance at some point.
And you can add me to the list of people who own it, yet have not played it. I had picked it up. I think I got it for about 20 or so, and I was fixing to play it, but then we ended up moving. So it got packed up, and it did not get packed up with the other games and whatnot. So it's here. It's somewhere. I'm not sure where, but I am looking forward to playing it once I do find it.
It's really well done. I think it's more than worth playing, and it's not like it's a long game at all. It is an RPG, but it doesn't seem like it's going to last more than about 10, maybe 15 hours. And it's very straightforward. There's a few side quests here and there, but overall, it's very you have a certain thing you need to do. You're going to go do that, and the story continues. So there's not much room for wandering around, and I really appreciate that after all the open world games that I played in the last year where I constantly get distracted with everything, like the settlements in Fallout 4. This one has a very, very narrow scope to it, and I really, really forgot how much I appreciate that, especially in an RPG. So I would definitely recommend playing. I'm really enjoying what I played now.
Well, now I'm going to have to try it because it was something I definitely keep looking at it, the sealed box, and I'm thinking I've got to get this out someday. But now I've got to try it so that at least I can refer to it when it might be at least loosely tied to an episode of the show. So I'm down for that. Yeah,
check it out. I mean, it's seems like a really good game to kind of pull out between really large games, and that's kind of what I was hoping for. And so it's more than worth your time.
Yeah, I think it'll probably come up in discussion again when we do that South Park 64 episode.
Episode 100. Get ready.
I mean, we're doing Bayou Billy today. We can't ever do any other game as bad as Bayou Billy again. So,
but is it as bad as Bayou Billy? I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, let's just jump right in to the pure moments of joy we had while playing the Adventures of Bayou Billy for the Nintendo Entertainment System. So, I guarantee we've all played this before the podcast. I don't think anyone had not played this before we recorded this, right? I mean, not recorded, but before we were getting ready to record this episode.
Well, I rented it. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Billy.
What a gentleman. I rented this, and it was one of those things, if you were a kid and you saw something that had your name in it, you immediately if it was a movie or a game, you immediately had to watch it or play it. So when I saw The Adventures of Bayou Billy, I was very excited. And I remember sitting there at the video store, sitting on the ground in front of the Nintendo section. I saw it, I snatched it up. I got my mother to run it to the counter. I brought it home, and I played through the first stage. Well, not through the first stage, because the first night I did not get through the first stage. And by the end of the weekend, I had gotten to the driving level, that first one, which we will speak on as the show goes on. And then it was time to take it back, which I did, and I never picked it up again, which I can't stress how much of a rarity that is. Because whenever I picked up a game, if I didn't finish it that weekend, I'd take down the password, I would do whatever, and then I would pick it up, and then I would try to finish it, and I would just keep renting it until then. No, one and done on this one.
Not that you could have saved a password if you wanted to.
No.
My story is basically the same. This was one of the very first Nintendo games I ever rented back when I was a kid, and it was brand new at the video store, and looked really cool. It's got a cool box cover. The back looked really neat. Took it home, and just like Billy, within the first 30 minutes of playing it, I was crestfallen. It's a terrible, terrible time. And even me, as a young kid who played through many, many terrible games, I could not last more than a few hours with Bayou Billy before I just put it back in the box and never touched it again. It was rough. It taught me a valuable lesson back in the day when I thought there was no bad NES games. Bayou Billy taught me that there are bad NES games, really bad NES games, and I have not touched it since until just a few weeks ago.
Well, I'm sure you guys will thank me profusely throughout this episode, but I had to revisit this. I know I had a copy of this as a kid. I know that everyone that I was friends with that played Nintendo, at least every other one of us had this game. It was, first of all, it was Konami, who at this point in time, they made Castlevania, they had Contra, they had so many other great games. There's no way this game would be bad. It's Konami. Also, you have to remember the year. This was 1989. So the year before, the most amazing sequel to Crocodile Dundee came out in 1988. The country was in a frenzy for Crocodile Dundee. And here's this game that looks like Crocodile Dundee the game. I mean, the outfit is exactly the same as the outfit on the movie poster for Crocodile Dundee 2. You can't imagine this game is going to be bad. It got its own spread in Nintendo Power. It was not a cover issue, but it was in the I don't remember which issue it was. It was in an issue where they gave you maps and they showed you, all the different things it could do, because it wasn't really one game. It's 3 game styles. Now that's not a big deal. Grand Theft Auto has driving sections, it has action sections, it's got all these weird side games, and you can play blackjack, you can do all these other things, but that's normal in the game now. But back in 1989, a game that had not just side-scrolling beat-em-up pieces and driving pieces, but another third section where you could use the light gun. I mean, that's 3 games in one from a company that wasn't going to give you a turd. And it was based on what's a terrible series of movies, but at the time seemed great. I mean, there's no way this game was going to be bad. And I don't want to say that it's a bad game, because the mechanics of the game, it doesn't look sloppy. It doesn't look like they just threw it together. It doesn't have, horrible glitches that make it unplayable or things that don't do what they're supposed to. It's just unforgiving and shitty.
Oh, it's a bad game. You are correct, and Konami did not give you a turd with this game. They gave you 3. There are 3 different styles of play in this. One of them is at least half decent. We'll see if everybody agrees on what that is as we go along. And it at best is just boring, I think, is the biggest compliment I could give it. But oh man, this game, I've never been more miserable, I think, to play a video game. There's usually that air of excitement that comes. And speaking of excitement, I'm going to give you a rare glimpse behind the scenes. One person in this podcast came to the other 2 of us very excited that Bayou Billy was out on the Wii U, on the eShop channel. And Jeremy P., he may try to play it down, but I think there was genuine excitement in his voice when he presented that to us.
There really was. First off, I knew this was a game that I always thought was way too hard, and therefore a piece of me thought, if I really spend time on this and get good at it, I'm going to accept that it's a good game, and I just wasn't good enough for it. But also, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago on the eShop, they put a series of light gun games out because you can use the Wiimote as the light gun. So they also had Hogan's Alley and Wild Gunman, and I don't know what it is about those, because I don't really enjoy playing them, but I like that they did it. So I bought it because I was going to try it both, with the light gun Wiimote and also with the controller. By the way, don't ever play this with the light gun Wiimote. It is almost impossible. But I was super excited about it. It was also on the list, to be fair. Jeremy put it on the list as well, although I think he just did it to spite everybody else.
I only did it because as soon as I knew I put it on the list, everyone was going to be like, no, we will never play this game for the podcast. And then what the fuck happens? We play this game for the podcast. And I'm not going to give this game points just because I can boot it up and play it. It is a terrible game all around, just because it's got 3 different game types in it. I don't think that should, it's cool that they did that, but I kind of wish they would have just made one of them fun, or at least not made you want to just, throw the controller at the TV constantly. It is a terrible brawler. It is a terrible light gun game. And it is a absolute travesty of a driving action game, whatever the fuck those stages are. It is, from beginning to end, just a giant pile of shit. And I really can't believe I played it as much in the last 2 weeks as I did. I did the same as you. I was trying to maybe find something that was worthwhile with this game. But maybe the music's not bad, but the rest of this game is trash.
Well, let's get started. Instead of just talking about how bad each of these things are, let's really focus on each one. So the game starts. The first level is a side-scrolling brawler level, which, in the 8-bit Nintendo days, there were a million of these. That's Rival Streets and Final Fight. Any of those games where you walk from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen, fighting guys, as the screen stops scrolling. Once you finish killing those guys, you can then continue to scroll. It doesn't need a lot of explanation. What makes this specific side-scroller notable, in positive or negative, is that it's extremely hard and it's extremely unforgiving. You have 7 hit points essentially in your life bar, and you're lucky if you'll beat up anything without at least taking 1 to 2 hits. If you're lucky, only 2 hits.
Well, the problem is, I have not had an exchange with even the first enemy that pops up. The regular standard should be the easiest goon in the game. It still will land 1 or 2 hits on you. It's because when I think any good side-scrolling game, like Double Dragon, for instance, when you hit an enemy, they go into an animation, that they have been hit. In that period of time, you can chain together a couple of hits usually. You can develop a technique, you can give them a punch or a kick or whatnot, and you can mix it up. On here, if you punch them, they maybe flinch just a little bit, but they will just stand there with you and just slug it out. And these are the early enemies. I defy anybody on their first playthrough of this game to get through that first level without dying, without just game over on the first level. And I think another problem is during these levels, your character, and the thing about the side-scrolling beat-em-ups, your character always seems just a little stronger until it comes to a boss. Just a little bit stronger than the regular enemies out there. But you're not. You have no clear advantage over these guys. They seem to take as many hits as you do. They have the same attacks. Some seem to have even more. Usually they come in armed. You are just a much weaker character altogether than even the lowliest of thugs in this game.
Dan, there's like you said, there's no combos. Once you throw a punch, your character goes back to their standard animation, and the enemy does not go into any sort of, he doesn't flinch backwards long enough for you to throw another punch before he gets an attack on you. And I thought, all right, whatever. Maybe the jump kick is the way to go. The jump kick is if you press B and A together. You'll do like a little standing jump kick. If you're going forward or backwards, you'll jump around. But even that, even though it's more powerful, it's still, you're going to take hits. It is impossible not to take hits when you're fighting these guys. If there is a way, I'd like to know. But as far as I can tell, even if you time this, pixel perfect, the length, they will still have enough to hit you back. So you're always going to lose at least 2 or 3 bars of energy with every single person that you come across in those stages.
Well, and not only do they not in any way, well, they do a slight flinch, but it's not long enough for you to do anything about it. But then they immediately, when I was playing, at least 50% of the time, they would immediately just punch or kick right back. Like it was as soon as you hit them, they'd flinch back long enough for you to pull your fist back again, and then they're kicking you right in the face. And then there's nothing you can do other than take that damage. You can't block. You do get a bulletproof vest later, but I don't think it stops blunt attacks from doing damage. I think it just actually stops bullets. So it's less than useful since I think there's 2 guys with bullets in the entire game. So much like any other brawler, as you're fighting guys, sometimes you'll punch them and they'll drop a weapon if they have a weapon on them, or some of them have food that's great because that'll heal you up because you'll need it. The weapons that you get, you think, oh great, now I've got a weapon. Now I'm going to destroy these guys. I don't really think the weapons are all that much stronger than a punch or kick as it is. And in some cases, it makes it actually harder to hit guys effectively, I found, than just jump kicking over and over again.
Yeah, I think the weapon at best maybe there's no added power that I can tell. I think it may give you a little more range, maybe. But that's it. But the hit detection is so poor, so very poor. We're talking, you have to hit that. You have to hit that certain pixel. If they're too far, of course you're gonna miss. If they're too close and you're going something longer range, you're still gonna miss. And and I played through, and I started to foolishly build up maybe a small bit of confidence. I had gotten down a few guys taking minimal hits. I was still taking damage, but I got my energy refilled, and this is the first stage, mind you. And there comes time you have to jump off land, and you have to wade through this river in the swamp, and there's these shadows. Obviously, it's got to be a crocodile or something like that under there, and you try to get by those. But there comes a time where you cannot, and you are face to face. Mind you, it's the first level. I had a stick. I just had a stick, and I was tasked with taking down 2 crocodiles. And that fight wasn't infuriating because I was taking damage, because I could get through it with minimal damage. But this goes back to what you say when the weapon really doesn't add much. You had to just get within a certain range. You had to coax them into coming up, and you could only do that by moving back a couple steps from them. Then they pop up, and I don't know if you just have to have split-second reflexes just to hit them right at that moment, or else you either take a hit or you're too late. And I stood waiting around in there forever on that fight.
Well, and they take a million hits. I mean, It's
Yeah.
not that bad, but you probably have to hit each alligator if you don't have the stick. I think the stick takes 8 hits, but your fists take like 12 hits. So the stick is slightly stronger than your fist, but the difference between 8 hits and 12 hits is still that both of those are way too many hits for a standard enemy to take in a game, especially when you have to wait for them to move around under the water, and they go like in a half circle kind of back and forth, and eventually they come up and you can hit them one time if you're lucky before they hit you. The only good thing with it's good and bad. The good thing with those alligators is that they do drop extra food, so there's a good chance that if you're fighting an alligator, it will drop meals. However, because it drops them in the water, I'd say 90% of the time they'll drop it, and either they pick it back up somehow under the water just because their character rise over it, or I just never find it because it's in the middle of the swamp. And I can't tell you how many times I died because I was down to 1 or 2 life points just running through the swamp trying to find that meat that just came off that alligator. But it happened a good number of times. So you'll fight the alligators, and then right after you have to fight those alligators is the first and only time that I think in the game where you run into people with guns. These guys come up in scuba gear out of the next swamp over. You can get their gun, which is great because it gives you bullets as well, that you actually have to switch from your regular weapon to the gun to use. And then you fight probably 5 more guys total in the whole level, which you can use those bullets, and if you have them, great, you might get through the end of the level without dying. Because otherwise, once you get to the end of the level, you lose your items, you lose your gun, you lose your bullets, because the second level starts the second type of game, which is the shooter section of the game, the light gun section. Now, do you guys like light gun games at all?
Oh, sorry.
Let me try that again. Do you guys like light gun games at all?
No.
I like Duck Hunt okay. And there was another one, Gumshoe, that I tolerated, but no. I mean, altogether, that's been something I enjoy in the arcade only. I just never really had the time for it at home.
I've never been good at them. I mean, everyone's fine at Duck Hunt, and I played a lot of the early Nintendo ones. I had a copy of Gotcha, which is the only worse light gun game than this.
Oh, jeez.
Gotcha is so bad. It's just boring. It's not that it's a bad game as much as it's the most boring game ever made. But this instead it's worse than the Nintendo port of Operation Wolf in that things just fall, like guys just fall from the sky. You're going left to right. The screen scrolls through a swamp area like what you were just in, and all of a sudden you have a gun with 100 bullets if you play with the controller, which is game style B, or 50 bullets if you play with the light gun. And then you just shoot guys that are either hiding behind a tree or just fall from the sky as you scroll to the right until eventually you get to the end of the level where you fight a helicopter, which with the light gun I was unable to beat the helicopter. I tried over and over again, and I eventually decided that maybe it's because the Wii version of the light gun has a slight delay because it actually puts the cursor on the screen like the Wii pointer would be. So it's not as fluid as the original light gun would have been with an old TV. But I just found it to be too slow and not responsive enough. So I switched back to game B next time, and with the extra bullets and the fact that you can, slam on that B button as fast as you need to, I was able to take down that helicopter. But what a terrible boss. And other than that boss, the rest of the level is just boring. A very boring shooter.
No. Yeah, I agree. But I need to throw in a warning. Not that anyone is, for your sake, don't go play this afterwards. But if you do, make sure you pick the right game type at the beginning. If you choose the light gun, I can't recall which is which. I know
A is light gun. A is light gun.
Well, if you choose A and you get to this stage and you do not have, if you're playing on the NES, you do not have a light gun, you're out of luck. There's no way. You have to reset and start over again and get through that opening stage. Well, I think it's a slap in the face. You're already suffering if you made it to this point.
Like we said, I mean, it's a cool thing that they put it in there, but having limited ammo like that, I actually forgot that you have limited ammo. So I was going through this stage, and I was like, this ain't too bad. I was just holding down the button, just killing everyone left and right. And then I just get a game over screen. I wasn't paying any attention to the fact that I had limited bullets. And when I got back there, I saw that. I was like, oh, this game, it just keeps kicking you right in the balls just every chance it gets. It doesn't let up. Like any little thing that it can do to make the experience more painful in each one of these game modes, it has done. And I finally got by it and everything. Like you said, the helicopter is terrible. It's just as terrible as I remember it back when I was a kid. And because of that limited ammo, you actually have to memorize relatively large chunks of this stage where everyone's going to jump out, where everybody's hiding, and you have to be very frugal with the amount of bullets that you're shooting at these guys. You just can't lay on it because that would actually be fun. The game doesn't want you to have fun with it. So you have to sit here and memorize just about where every fucking person's going to drop down, where they're going to run by. It's miserable, and probably the worst gun game experience I've ever played on the NES. Even worse than Gotcha.
Well, what makes this worse if you play the game A with a light gun and you actually have a light gun so you can play it is that it does start you with less bullets. I guess they decided that would be easier than with a controller. I think it would be the exact opposite. I mean, I think with a controller you can pretty much destroy this first shooting section without a whole lot of problem. But the light gun, they only give you 50 bullets. And that means not only do you have to memorize where everybody is so you don't waste bullets, you've got to make sure that the 5 guys in the level that drop bullets when you kill them, you don't let go by. You can't miss them, or you will run out of ammo before you even get to that helicopter. It is not enjoyable. It's only hard in managing your resources, and then again, the helicopter itself is hard. But I'd say of the parts of the game, the shooter is probably the least frustrating.
Yeah. It's not fun, but it's probably the least frustrating. I'll give you that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, like I said at the beginning, this is the one that is the, I guess, least offensive. It's just bland, and that's it.
I guess this is the one that just reminds me most of, just a regular NES light gun game. Besides the bullets and everything, it works. You shoot a guy, and you don't have to just sit there and keep getting hit in the face or anything like that. It's, it's inoffensive, but when that's the best I can give the entire game, you're doing something wrong.
Well, the gun section is only the second of the 3 game styles. So after beat level 2, level 3 is another side-scrolling action level. It's actually pretty unremarkable. It's just like the first level. It's still in the swamp. You fight the same enemies, except that it does have a boss at the end who's just a big wrestler guy. Nothing really remarkable about him except that you have to really, really get down how to get a jump kick in and get away. Because if you don't get away, he grabs you and pile drives you, and that's it. And you won't do enough damage to him for the number of times he'll pile drive you. So the only way I found to not just beat him, but any of the side-scrolling regular guys, is you'd have to jump kick him exactly at the right length to where during that one flash of a response on their end where they kind of flinch, you can walk straight down, and then whatever they try to do, punch you, kick you, throw you, it will miss. And you have to time it perfectly, which is irritating because it means that the jump kick is the only real weapon of use at this point in the game. But after you get through the third section, which I think if you did have the patience to play this and you did get through the first section, the third level side-scroller you'll have no real problem with. That's when you come into what I believe is the worst part of this game, and maybe any game that wasn't completely broken, and that is the driving sections. Driving sections are bad.
This is the tip top of the shit pile right here. This is just, I think it goes down. It could probably go down as one of the worst levels in video game history. I don't know where to start on this. This was what shut me down. This is what, as a kid who loved video games and thought video games couldn't possibly hurt me. Video games can never do me any wrong. This is when I learned a hard lesson. And this is the one that killed my youthful enthusiasm towards this game and sent me packing. And it's every bit as bad as I recalled, and maybe then some.
Well, the game, the driving sections, I guess to explain the mechanics of it, it's not a side-scrolling driving game. It is almost like Road Blasters. You're driving from into the screen. And the course goes left and right, or Enduro, or one of those old kind of racing games, pole position. It's that kind of racing, but not anywhere near as fun, because I don't know if it's that it tries to seem like it's going too fast, but I found things just come up on you way too quickly. You can shoot cars that come by, but for whatever reason you can't shoot rocks, and there are rocks just strewn throughout the path you're taking from the swamp to follow to get your girlfriend back. And while you're fighting these other cars that come through and trying to dodge rocks, if you can see them fast enough, which I could not, you have a time limit, which means you can't take your time and make this a reasonable driving section. You have to go as fast as you possibly can. And there are helicopters that come by and drop bombs on you that sometimes, especially if they show up during a turn, you can't dodge. If you're lucky and you remember you can do this, which I didn't, you can throw grenades at them. And that sometimes helps, but depending where you are, you may not be able to do that, especially because if you're throwing a grenade, you can't shoot forward until that grenade is done on its path. So a lot of the time, if there's a car somewhere on the screen and there's a helicopter coming, I was afraid to throw a grenade, because if you run into the car, you immediately die. That's what makes this driving game the most frustrating, is that if you're hit once by a car, by a rock, by a bomb, you lose a life. And you only have 3 lives, assuming you start fresh at that level. If you continue at that point or whatever, you have 3 lives, which means hitting 3 things. And it's like a minute and a half long driving section for that first driving level.
Like Billy, this was the one that broke me. I as a kid, I got to this stage and I wasn't having a good time to begin with, and I got to this one, and you have to be so perfect in a thing that doesn't allow you to be perfect, or tries its best to, we're just every corner you can come up to, it's going to try to kill you. And it's almost impossible to do. I don't even know how I managed to get past this as a kid. I did. But this one, when I got to this stage now, was the one that made me stop playing the game. Because even with save states, I refuse to do this again. It's unplayable, almost. I mean, in my opinion.
It feels like a punishment It's like, oh, you're still playing. What's wrong with you? Here, surely this will teach you. You know, I had to resort to some desperate measures at this point. And all right, I bought this as a kid, and I told myself at the time I was not going to depend on it. I was going to get it out only in times of dire need. So this time, for the first time in the history of this podcast, I had to get the Game Genie out
Oh shit!
for a game, and with the help of infinite lives and at times infinite energy, I was able to get through. I don't think I would have otherwise. I don't think I have the attention span, nor at this point in time. This game had broken me all over again. I didn't have the desire to keep going, but I don't see how you could do it. I know there are people that can play through this. I like to go on YouTube and kind of see speed runs to see how actual good players play through these games. And yeah, I see people getting through it. I have no clue how. I personally, I think I'm decent at video games. I'm really good at some. I can usually get pretty good at most. I will never be good at this one. I will never be able to, on my own, sit down and play through this game all the way through without assistance.
I don't. I mean, I know it's possible because there are people who have done it, but I don't know if if it wasn't for this podcast and save states, I would never have played this again, and there's no way I would have gotten past this driving level. This game, and I think I said this to Billy when we were talking about it, this game is rude. This is a rude game. So not only do you die in one hit, and then thankfully if you die in one hit during the car section, you do get to start right where you stopped at until you have to continue. Then you go back to the very beginning of that level. And I'm sure they said this in the manual. None of us have the manual, I'm sure, still for this game. But you only have a handful of continues. It's 3 or 4. It's not many. So as a kid, if you managed to get through that first section, and you probably had died and had to continue before you got through the gun section, and then you died and continued probably on the third level with the boss. But then you'll get to this driving stage, and you're like, yes, this is where I'm going to learn how to do it. And you die in one hit 3 times, and you have to continue. And it doesn't warn you how many continues you have left. All of a sudden, it's just like, your game is over, and it takes you back to the start screen. I know that happened to me a bunch of times as a kid, and I know that was the point where I just gave up and didn't bother. I know I made it to the driving levels. I never made it past. But because of that, I didn't even know. So you finally force yourself to play this game as an adult, and you play through this level with save states, and even with save states, it probably took me an hour to get through this driving level. And I get to the end of it, and the next level is another driving level.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, that was the point where, I mean, even now, even knowing that I had save states and therefore I had not used any continues, I just sat there and stared at it, and I thought, what have I done? Right. I've taken... This podcast was going to be about Skull Monkeys, a great game, and hopefully the next one is. Because this game, this was the point where I was like, I am a dick. I can't believe I called this game, because this is infuriating. These driving levels aren't fun, even when you literally have no way you can fail. They're awful.
The second, the 2 in a row. Oh, I just sat there and I thought, they got a lot of fucking nerve doing that. It's just, the game gets increasingly insulting. The first driving level was one middle finger from them, extended towards you. The second, they get out the second hand. They give you 2, right there in your face. This game...
Now, as a kid, I made it through both of these driving stages.
Oh.
I actually made it through. I remember this. I don't remember too many things about a lot of those early NES games that I rented. But Bayou Billy, I think I put so much of my own life force into that I remember every little thing about this game that I played. And I made it through both of those driving stages eventually. And then I got to that next stage, which I believe is... you're finally in Louisiana or something. You're in a city. And it takes so much effort. You have to play that game so perfect to get past those 2 driving stages and the bullshit that came before it, that by the time you get to that next side-scrolling stage, you don't have any more effort left. I mean, it's the same side-scrolling shit as before, just harder. There's more enemies and everything coming at you. And you've probably spent a few continues at that point just to get to that point. And then you die. There's that game over screen. And all you know that you have to do everything you just did. Those 2 side-scrolling stages, that 1 shooting stage, and those 2 horrible driving stages again, just to get back to where you were. I turned it off and put it back in that box. I was done. I never wanted to play that game again.
Oh, and I would say that's the right choice, because even, I did make it through the driving stages, and I did get to the stage 6 is a side-scrolling stage that you finally gets you out of the swamp. You're in it's New Orleans or something, and immediately you fight 3 guys at the same time who have
yes.
Is it knives? It's something they actually don't even drop. Like, it's a weapon they can't drop that it has a better range than anything you've got.
Is it whips?
Like, this game, well, you get whips later. I will say the whip is the only weapon in the game I found. I mean, the gun is great because it does do a lot of damage, but again, I only saw it in the first level. So the whip, though, a great weapon. It gives you a better range than most of those guys have. Because it's got such a good range, you can actually chain whip hits together. So if you have a whip and you're only fighting one guy at a time, there's a really good chance you can just whip the shit out of him, get 2 or 3 hits before he even comes close enough to you, run away, turn around, hit him 2 or 3 times. You might kill a guy without getting hit. That's the only way I found to do it, though, is with the whip or with the gun. So the level 6, you're finally in New Orleans, and you'll get through that level, which was not, I think, compared to the first 2 side-scrolling stages, is not too bad, again, because you can get a couple whips in it, and the whips, once you get it, kind of give you an advantage. And then you get to the next and the final gun stage, which is much harder than the first gun stage, and the boss I can't imagine ever defeating ever. I mean, I did it for this podcast because I was able to save right before I got to the boss, and I probably tried him 30 times before I finally beat him. What a garbage boss. It's 2 guys you fight at the same time, almost like in Castlevania, the original Castlevania, there's like an Igor and a Frankenstein's monster you fight at the same time, where one of them hops around and shoots fireballs at you, and the other one just goes back and forth really slowly but does a lot of damage if he hits you. This is the same idea. There's a guy that hops around and throws knives, and then there's a huge guy with a machine gun. And if you hit the guy with the machine gun, he stops long enough for you to find and hit the guy that's jumping around throwing knives at you. So I ended up having to you basically shooting left side of the screen, right side of the screen, left side of the screen, right side of the screen, left side of the screen, right side of the screen, flawlessly. And if you can do that flawlessly, you can beat him. But if you mess that up at all, you're dead. That's it. Back to the beginning of the stage. Miserable boss.
See, I didn't get to that point. I didn't even watch a playthrough of this because I was so angry at it. I didn't want to see the rest of it. And it's you can barely play it when you're just trying to play the regular stages, so I can't even imagine coming up to a boss of this like this. It just doesn't even seem possible.
I got there. I used the I don't have anything to be ashamed of in this show. I played this game. That's a big enough shame. I used a level skip on the Game Genie. There, I skipped this level. I didn't have the infinite or the infinite health or whatnot for this one. I said I just want to take a look at these last levels. I'm going to play through them. When I die, I die. And this boss, it goes. I don't see how you can do it. And I found myself at more than one point in this game. It just makes you think about other things, better ways you could spend your time. You could be around the ones you love. Yeah, you could you write that novel you want to write.
And go back to college.
Finish that television series you've been watching. Play a better game. Do something. Do something better with your life. This game makes you want to get out there and do something better. Horrible.
I guess I should be proud that I did get as far as I did as a kid. And what did I get to? Level 5 or 6?
You got to 6. You got through the 2 driving levels. It's farther than I did on my own without save states
that.
and.
I mean, I should get like an award for that. As a kid, I didn't feel like I achieved anything. I felt, when you're playing a good game and you make it past certain levels, you feel, this certain level of achievement. That you're like, yeah, I did it. I've gotten better as a player. I know how to play this game better, and this game does nothing like that. It just, you feel relieved that you have made it to a new stage, and then you see that next stage and realize it's even worse than the last one. You were just slogging through just just a pile of shit all the way through. And I never felt like that I accomplished anything, even by getting that far. I just remember turning it off in defeat and being completely sad that I rented this game instead of Mega Man 2.
Yeah, getting somewhere in this game. It's probably not. You probably didn't even mention this at school. It's not even something you brag about to your friends that you got that far in Bayou Billy. There's no pride to be taken in this game.
It's like somebody would, you'd say that to a friend and they'd be like, "Oh man, I'm sorry."
Yeah, my condolences.
Really sorry you got that far.
Well, if somehow you got through the second shooting stage, you're then to the last two stages of the game. Stage 8's another side-scrolling Louisiana level. It's basically the same as the previous one. But the last level is just the final boss fight. So you've played this game now. You only have 3 continues. You've managed to get all the way to the last boss. And he's not a hard fight compared to some of the other boss fights. You can actually hit him a couple times before he hits you, depending what you're doing. And then you figure the game is over. The whole game you've been chasing, I don't remember his name because it doesn't matter, bad guy with a hat. And bad guy with a hat, who's a big, heavy-set gentleman with a gun, you finally take him out. And all of a sudden, 2 giant, almost like double dragon abobos come in different colors and just beat the crap out of you, and I never was able to beat them. I don't know who they are. I don't know why they're there. They're never mentioned in the game. Apparently, they're supposed to be his bodyguards, but they come after he's dead, so they're not very good bodyguards. and it's rude. It's like you did all this work, and you finally beat the guy you've been chasing the whole time. You're like, yes, I get my girlfriend back. I think that's what I was doing. I've forgotten. And all of a sudden, 2 huge guys that don't belong in the game at all come into the room and just proceed to beat you mercilessly. It's terrible.
What more do you expect at this point? What more do you expect? But I'm gonna say something that a lot of people probably haven't. Let's talk about the story to Bayou Billy. All right. So your girlfriend's been kidnapped. Why has she been kidnapped? Bayou Billy, by all means, he appears to be a man of simple means. I don't think he can meet even the smallest of ransoms. Did you read anything? Did I miss something? I didn't let the game play through at the beginning. Did it explain everything?
It just explains that he took your girlfriend because he wanted her.
Ooh.
So you're going to go and save her because Boss Hogg stole her. That's pretty much the story I got.
And I, as a kid, I probably didn't pick up on it, but as an adult, I think that he's left her in a bad way by the time you get there. More than likely.
Very likely. But it doesn't matter because I didn't save her because 2 random large men came and beat the crap out of me after I beat the person I thought was the end of the game. If I would have somehow gotten that far playing on the cartridge and getting to the end and that was like my last continue, I would have actually broken my Nintendo in half. I would have ripped it in half with my bare hands and then just continued to break every other thing I owned. I would have been living in a house that was on fire because of Bayou Billy.
I think that's the ultimate goal of that game, is to just continually beat you down, either to the point where you throw your Nintendo out the fucking window, or you just don't play games anymore. It does not seem like the person... I mean, we'll get to this here in a minute when we talk about the Japanese version. But the person that produced the American version of that game hated video games. I genuinely think that they hated people, everyone on Earth, and video games, especially video games, because they made that game into it's hard to describe just how it makes you feel playing that game.
Or this is life, the video game. It may as well be. It's unfair. You can't win. You're going to die by the end of it. You think you're getting ahead a little bit. You think you're kind of getting it down. You're kind of getting a little better, and no. And then they completely turn it upside down on you, and you fail miserably yet again. And you're destined to the entirety of the time you play.
Yeah, it is just like life.
Pretty much.
It's a sobering game. But speaking about the story, if there's anyone here on this podcast that knows anything about the story of Bayou Billy, it should be Billie Holiday himself, who owned Bayou Billy comic books that I didn't even know existed. So I think you're going to have to talk about exactly what the hell Bayou Billy comic books are all about.
And why would you have had them?
Yes, why did you buy them?
I don't know. I don't remember actually buying these, but they sure enough, they're there. And I read the first few the first few issues, and I'll be honest with you, I still have no further grasp for the for the story. The story isn't necessarily tied to this video game. Once again, I can't tell if it's the same boss or not, but there's another man. I think Jeremy P said it with boss hog like qualities, and Bayou Billy is, I think, angry that he's messing around in his area, in the swamplands, the good honorable swamplands this man's rolling through. And the love interest in that is a police agent of some sort, if I remember correctly. And I fully intend to have these up on retrovania.net. And I was working on it, and then I hit a big snag. I realized I have 4 issues. There are 5. There are 5 issues in the series, and I can't find the 5th one. And, this is one of those things, if people own it, they're not parting with it. Nobody's going to let their Bayou Billy issue number 5 go. To note in it, though, Bayou Billy seems to be a lot more kind of capable of fighting. He's got flash powder. He's got some ropes on him. He very handily takes down the hired henchman. He's everything you would want from the video game. But yeah, 3 issues I read, covered front to back, and really there's not a lot of story there. It's just Bayou Billy get in a couple fights, and the police agent, the lady, she's got a thing for him, but he's turning her down left and right several times throughout. So no time for the ladies, this Bayou Billy.
So we're not sure if this was a prequel to the game or something that happened after the fact.
We don't know, and we don't care. I think. I don't know. I don't know if after this he got a name for himself out there for his shooting and driving and fighting abilities, or if maybe this is a prequel and maybe the video game is the revenge. I don't know. I could see that maybe. But, right now we've reached that point in time where I really can't believe we spent this much time delving into the story of Bayou Billy, the Bayou Billy universe.
It's sadly just about the only thing interesting about Bayou Billy. I will give it that the whole Crocodile Dundee, the setting, the characters, it was different. It definitely wasn't, the same as a lot of these other kind of games with the, space combat or the other kind of shit that it was doing back then. To have something set in Louisiana and the Bayou and New Orleans, it was kind of neat. I mean, it looked really cool, but just the rest of the game wasn't. So yeah, I could totally understand why we sat here and talked about the rest of it, because it's the only thing mildly interesting about Bayou Billy.
But yeah, and also I think we spoke of this earlier on, and not during the podcast itself, so it has to be brought up. That voice at the beginning. On the NES, the guy comes on and he reads off the title of the game to you. And, as a kid, besides the difficulty, that's the one thing as a kid I recall. And if you're already excited, because it's a nice looking box, you mentioned it earlier, the box cover at the back, it looks exciting. But again, that voice, you think you are in for something at that point. I mean, the rest of the sound is decent. But that voice at the beginning, probably the most impressive part. It's all downhill from there, though.
Well, you brought up for a minute earlier, Jeremy, that the Japanese version of the game is significantly different. The Japanese version is called Mad City. It came out earlier. And most notably, and I'm sure we can break this down a little bit. We don't need to spend a whole lot of time on it, but basically it's easier. It's a feasible version of the game we just played.
It's weird. I'm not going to go out and say it's a good game, but the Japanese version of Mad City, I took it on myself to download a ROM of it and play it because, who owns a copy of Mad City for the NES? It's significantly easier. In the original Bayou Billy, I'm sure you've got more stuff. I played the first couple of stages just to see if it was different, and but you might have more than what I know. But just that first stage alone, it's so much easier to play this game. The enemies themselves, in the American version, you have to jump kick them 6 or 7 times to take them down. Just a basic enemy. In the Japanese version, 2 jump kicks. That's it.
2 kicks, 2 jump kicks to kill guys. If you have a stick and you fight the alligator section, 2 hits.
Oh.
So literally,
you don't even have to fight the alligators in this one.
Well, you can. The first time you can skip them in this, but you're right. They also have different layouts of the levels. I don't believe you're forced to fight the crocodiles at any point in time.
No.
But the levels are. It's basically the same game. They definitely changed some of the level layouts and number of enemies and such for the U.S. But the big piece is everything takes a lot longer to kill. That's a horrible way to make the difficulty harder. So that's how the side-scrolling sections are different. The gun section is different because they give you more bullets. Otherwise, it's basically the same game on the gun sections. I didn't find them to be incredibly hard, but with doubling your ammo makes a huge difference. And also the ammo drops give you twice as much as well. So there's just a lot more ammo in the Japanese version. The driving section is the one that, when I saw the original version, it was almost like... That's where it really hits that they whoever did the translation for this hates you, hates me, hates Bayou Billy, hates the Nintendo, hates that you're out at home playing this instead of outside, I don't know, shoveling snow or whatever it is you're supposed to be doing. Because the driving sections, first off, the roads are larger, so it's a bigger piece of the screen. It's easier to dodge things. Secondly, most importantly, you have a full life bar like you do in the regular game. You can take 7 hits.
Oh, come on.
7 hits before you have to die, and then you get to start again with 7 hits. So you can, instead of taking 3 hits on a full continue, you have 21 hits of things you can take. Anyone could beat those driving stages. Well, maybe not the first time because they still aren't very fun, but at least you get a chance. You get a fighting chance to get through those levels without dying.
Now, I really don't understand, because this is, you hear about games not getting ported over here because they figured they would be considered too difficult, or hear about games that get changed up so much to lessen the difficulty for us here. How did this happen?
The only other game I know, and I'm sure this happened with a number of other games, but the only other one that I know for a fact that they made harder for the U.S. release was also Konami, and it's Castlevania 3. The U.S. version of Castlevania 3 is notably harder than the Japanese version, mainly that things always do increasing amounts of damage, where in the original release they don't. So in the later levels of Castlevania 3, you'll get hit by a bat and it does a full fourth of your life bar or whatever. Well, by the time you get to that point in the original release, it only does one sliver of your 16-point life bar or whatever it is Castlevania had. So that's another game that they made harder for the U.S. release, but in the Castlevania sense, they were like, the U.S. audience wants a longer game. They want a harder game. We're going to do that. And at least Castlevania 3 is still fun. As hard as they made things, you still kill guys in one hit. So making you take more damage is a much more enjoyable way to make it harder than making the enemies harder, which is the tactic taken with this game. But generally, I don't know why... Even with the easiness of Mad City, this still isn't fun necessarily. Like, the shooting parts are still not that enjoyable. The driving parts are still not that much fun. It's impressive they try to do all 3 things at once, but it's still kind of if you try to do too much, you end up failing at making what you wanted to make to begin with, I think. And I think this is a good example.
I think, Mad City, at its best, is an average NES game. And if that was released untouched over here, I think I would have had a good time with it. It's nothing crazy, but it would have made a good weekend rental. Just, kind of playing through it, stupid beat-em-up game, shooter game. It would be neat to see all of that back then and not have to suffer through it. But the translation that they did, they took a mediocre game and made it almost completely impossible by trying to do what they did to it. So it's pretty crazy to me that they went to that length. And at some point, you would think that they would have had to play test that and know just how hard and impossible it was to play. And I know back then there was a lot of games that were fairly short that they wanted to make very hard. You know, like Karate Kid for the NES was one of those. They'd have maybe 4 to 6 stages, but they try to make it as hard as possible. It never worked. And this seemed to be in the same line of thinking, where if we just make this really hard, it'll be a better game. It's not. It makes an average game into just complete tedium and not fun at all. So I wish Konami would have had some brains and just left this intact for the U.S. release.
So I do not recommend, if you have a Wii U, downloading this just because you want to play a light game. If you want to do that, definitely get, they put out Duck Hunt, Hogan's Alley, Wild Gunman. Anything is a superior gun game to this, because the gun portion of this not only is really not that much fun, but you have to force yourself to play through the other parts of the game to get to them. So on any version, I'm going to definitely say not to bother with Bayou Billy. There's not, there's definitely harder games. Battletoads is a harder game, but I think it's also a lot more fun.
It's way more fun.
Ghosts and Goblins is a much harder game, but it's also much more fun. This is just, the challenge is not just that the game is hard, but in getting yourself to not want to turn it off after about 3 minutes. Next episode, we're going to go ahead and do the game we were supposed to do this episode, which is Skull Monkeys for the PlayStation. A game I love, I put on the list. I'm glad we're doing it. And I can't believe that either of you guys are going to hate that one, even a fraction as much as you hate this one. So you won't hate me 2 weeks from now, which is nice.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Skull Monkeys is a far better game than Bayou Billy. I've actually played it myself. It's one of my favorite platformers of all time. I know I love this game, so I don't know if Billy's played it, but he would be the odd one out, I guess, if he hasn't.
No, I have never played this one before. I really don't have a clue about it at all, except for the that Beans clip that Jeremy has sent me on YouTube about 4 times now. But I think it bodes well, because each time I watch it, it's still hilarious. So I'm looking forward to it, and I need something after this week. I need something.
We need a palate cleanser after this mess, because it has been a trying 2 weeks, I think, for all of us to have to sit through Bayou Billy and play this repeatedly over and over again.
I think Skull Monkeys will scratch that itch. It'll make you enjoy retro gaming again after this, which would make you want to quit doing it and only play current games and never ever look at your Nintendo again. So, and before we end the episode, much like every other week, we have some listener mail. Do you have that question, Jeremy?
I do, and this week we don't just have one listener question. We have. Are you ready for this? We have 2 listener questions.
That means we have 2 listeners. I'm actually very impressed with that.
So all 2 listeners of Retrovaniacs have wrote in this week. The first one is from Richard, and hold on here. Let me pull this up so I can actually read it. Richard writes in and says, Jeremy's local butchering of the city of Louisville in a recent episode got me thinking about places and words I mispronounce on a daily basis myself, which eventually led down a path of me remembering video game characters and titles that I have knowingly mispronounced for years. Most of my life has been spent calling Ryu, Ninja Gaiden as Gaiden, and so on. So my question for you all is, do any of you have game titles or characters that you pronounced wrong for years, or still do just because it's how you always said it as a kid?
The one that comes to mind is I always said Kid Icarus is Kid Icarus forever, and that's clearly wrong, but not embarrassingly wrong. There's a lot of ones I thought of that were kind of like, yeah, I probably did say that wrong, but what it made me think of was when I used to work at Electronics Boutique. When customers would come in and ask for a game, a lot of the time they would mispronounce things that were, I mean, things like that. Kid Icarus, Kid Icarus, or Ninja Gaiden, or whatever. But my favorite one was, at one point they put out a compilation of the first 3 Mortal Kombats called Mortal Kombat Trilogy. It was not a very good port of all 3 Mortal Kombats, but at the time it was for PlayStation 1 and Saturn. So people would come in all the time and they're like, hey man, do you have the new 4th Mortal Kombat Triology? I love that game. And that was the one that I was like,
trilogy like
Triology. Well, no, they didn't even know what it meant. They just thought the title was Triology. They didn't know the trilogy meant a collection of 3 things. They would just call it the 4th Mortal Kombat Triology. That's what that made me think of.
Oh,
Are you sure more than one person ever said that?
Yes, I promise you, I had one person a day for like a month look for Triology.
Triology. I've never in my life heard someone say trilogy as triology.
Well, I mean, again, they didn't know what trilogy was supposed to be the word. They just Mortal Kombat 4. The title was Triology.
Well, I think that I'm guilty of pretty much nothing too bad. Probably most of the Street Fighter 2 cast of characters, though. Also, I called it was Ryu forever. Was it Blanca? Was it Blanca? I called the fella Saget all the time. I'd heard the name Bob Saget before. This looked very similar. The two could not be further removed from one another. But he was just Saget from there on out. I'm sure there's a lot of like smaller ones here and there. Nothing I'm mortified over that I had mispronounced for so long. But I'm also reminded of someone else. My son, the Mario Brothers villain Bowser. My son constantly at a young age would refer to as Browser. Much like your internet browser, and it just and I had to toe the line because we're still dealing with a small human being that that wasn't quite reading yet. Was just still just in kindergarten or so, or actually before. Still working on language skills, still doing all that, and he wasn't too into the game, so I had to toe the line and really hold the fury in every time I heard it, and it just grew every time. And I found out eventually, he was like 8 or 9, and still calling him Browser. But I eventually had found out at some point in time he had learned just how much it bothered me. So who knows for how many years. And I'm very impressed because, like I said, he was young. He was able to concoct a devious plan to just continue calling him Browser, just to make me angry. And I don't know if I appreciate it or if I'm just, I don't know. I think I'm starting to get slightly angry thinking about it now.
And you didn't put him up for adoption. I mean, that's...
And I didn't even do it when he referred to Assassin's Creed as Assassin's Cred. I didn't even do it then. The strength of a father's love, I guess.
These are all amazing alternate universe video game titles.
But I'm going to tell you, he wouldn't say triology. I raised him better than that.
After the second person did it, I was like, perhaps everyone doesn't know what this word means. This is amazing. And yeah, it was definitely a large number of people came looking for Mortal Kombat 4 triology.
I guess for me, the one that actually stayed with me up until just a few years ago was Legend of Kage for the NES and the arcade game. I always called it Legend of Cage. It's spelled N-A-G-E. Now, as a kid, you see that, that the closest thing to reference is Cage. So I always called that thing Legend of Cage, all the way up until, I think, 3 years ago, when it was featured on some sort of a YouTube video that I was watching about retro games. It came up, and I was like, oh, that's Legend of Cage. I know that. And the guy that was playing it was like, and here we see Legend of Kage. And I just kind of sat there because I realized for a good 33 years, I've been pronouncing this thing as Legend of Cage to people. And I don't know if they just didn't know or what, but no one has ever corrected me on that one. So I don't know if it's like a really long running joke with me of just people seeing how long I can go to mispronounce that game or just most people didn't know it. I mean, I know it was a fairly popular NES game back in the day. Did you guys say Cage or did you know better?
I said Cage.
I said Cage also. You're not alone.
Did. I think just a lot of people said Gaiden, Ninja Gaiden. You know, we didn't have the reference points we have now. We just had the words that were laid out on that box. You know, we didn't know how things were pronounced.
Well, going back to Billy's comment about his son, my son now, who's 4, you know, when you turn on Super Mario Maker, it says Super Mario Maker like a crowd. But I don't know how he misheard this. He keeps screaming he wants to watch me play Super Mario Anko.
Wait, what?
Super Mario Anko.
Anko. Well, he's 4. I mean, come
well,
on.
and I can hear where he heard that, but it took me forever to figure out what he was even saying. I was like, "What is Super Mario Anko?" He's like, "Yeah, Super Mario Anko, Dad." I'm like,
I think that makes sense. I mean, for like what we had to listen to back in the day, for those very primitive sounds, and the way a lot of those games didn't change the Japanese voice over to an English speaker. You know, there were a lot of R's that were L's to us for games. You know, it's a lot of that stuff was not changed for our audience. It was just a bad Japanese pronunciation of it, so that's what we went with.
And I'm going to warn you, if he's still doing that 4 or 5 years from now, it's probably on purpose.
No, I guarantee it's on purpose. His whole point in life is to irritate me, so I guarantee that he will do that. So what is our second question?
So we got one more question here. And Daniel writes in to ask, "Hey guys, nice podcast. Enjoy listening to it when I get the chance." That's like the nicest comment we've ever got. Mm-hmm. Got a super generic question that any old gaming podcast should be able to answer, and that is, what secret codes from old games were your favorites from the ancient days of our youth? Yes, even Game Genie codes count if it made the game more enjoyable.
Well, you know, I would use the Game Genie code from this, but it did not make the game more enjoyable. I remember, I mean, there's the classics. You know, the Konami code, I think, is probably the first I recall putting in. But my favorite was Sonic 2. There was a debug mode for it. And I believe from what I recall, you had to go into the sound test if you played if you played certain tracks in a certain order. There was not only a level select, but also you could kind of make your own stages, like a very primitive stage maker. You could take pretty much any item in the game, any enemy in the game, and in the pre-existing stage, whatever stage you selected, and you could place them around. It really didn't change a lot. You couldn't play through the game in that manner, but it was the first experience I had with that, where you kind of were able to just very, very roughly make your own level, and I think that's still probably one of my favorites.
I didn't even know that existed.
It's there for you. If you can pull yourself away from Bayou Billy.
I mean, does it give you every single, like, you can go into a stage and put stuff in it, just, you know, kind of like Mario Maker?
Yeah, I mean, you can drop, the boxes, the power-up boxes, you put rings wherever you want. I think, I'm fairly certain they had the full round of enemies also. I think you could sit them wherever you wanted, and then just kind of play through. I remember it kind of being a little bit broken, though, if you try to put certain things on certain stages, or if you put too much. But yeah, I think it's if you never have, it's pretty interesting to go through and do.
I guess for me, the one clearly the Konami code, the code to get to Mike Tyson, which I'll remember for no good reason forever. 007-363-5963 in case you're playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Justin Bailey on Metroid was a good one because it would let you start and look like Girl Metroid or Girl Samus. But the one I can't remember what the actual code is, which means I guess maybe this isn't the most memorable, but what it did was cool. On the TurboGrafx 16, I know you guys are big fans when I talk about the TurboGrafx 16, but when they put out the Super CD that came with a disc that had Gate of Thunder, Bonk, and Bonk's Revenge, if you were at the main screen, let you pick which game, and you put in, it was a very short code, like up, down, left, up 2 or something, it would make a quick like sound, and all of a sudden it would load up Bomberman, and you get the full entire version of Bomberman. Free unlockable on the disc. I thought that was much cooler than any other. The fact that you got Bomberman, better than all 3 of those games anyway. was a free unlockable game. Bomberman's a great game. So that was probably my favorite unlockable code. That was just something that was like, as soon as you knew it, you're like, oh yeah, up, down, left, right, 2. There you go, Bomberman.
Oh. I guess I don't really have anything like favorites or anything that made games more fun. I think for me back then it was just the act of finding those codes and doing them. It was kind of like you'd see them in a magazine or something. And it was like a modern day kind of treasure hunt, and some of those were kind of ridiculous. You had to have. You couldn't do it with the controller 1. You had to plug the controller on the NES anyway. This is what I remember. You had to plug the NES controller into port 2 to input the code, some of the code, and then you had to plug it back into port 1 if you didn't have a second controller, and then put the rest in to make the code work. And a lot of those were fairly complicated for those back in the day, and you had to do them in fairly pretty quick to make them work. It just wasn't like like up, down, left, right. I mean, you had to fucking be on your game to make a lot of those things work. And when you did, you felt like you fucking found something special, even if it is just like a music test or a sound test or something like that. But it was something that wasn't there before. And I always loved kind of the code section in magazines, just browsing those to see what people had found, because, of course, we didn't have internet back then because we were all horrible cavemen that didn't have anything modern. And that was really our only way of finding a lot of that stuff, was through magazines and hearsay. And I think it all came to a head back in the Mortal Kombat 2 days, when we play that. There was tons and tons of secrets in Mortal Kombat 2, and you go to school every day. I was in high school when it came out, and it seemed like every day in homeroom somebody had found some super secret thing in Mortal Kombat 2 that no one had ever seen, including nudalities and all this other shit that obviously never existed. But you never knew if they were serious or not about what they found, because, I mean, like I said, we didn't have internet, so we didn't know. So we'd be there at the end of, we go to the arcade after school trying to do these stupid fucking codes to do a nudality with Sonya. And of course it didn't work, but it was the act of doing it and just how enjoyable it was back then. So I think that was my favorite thing about secret codes then. It's not that they really ever brought me any more enjoyment out of the game. It was just that there was something buried in those games that you couldn't find otherwise unless you dug it out yourself.
So if you have a question for us, please send it. And if you're looking for other gaming content before our next episode on Skull Monkeys, please check us out at retrovania.net for videos and articles. And until then, that didn't make any sense. And we'll see you next time.